Hey, everybody, it's me, Evan Grant, your friendly Rangers insider from the DallasNews.com website and Dallas Morning News. I am here with another edition of This Week in Rangers Baseball, y'all. And it's not as dire or gloomy as it has been the last couple of weeks around here, despite the fact that this club just lost yet another future Hall of Famer. We'll talk about Max Scherzer here in a minute. We've got some other stuff, a lot of other things to talk about as the Rangers pursue a playoff berth with 17 games left to play as I record this, ahead of the series finale in Toronto. And I can predict the future. The Rangers will leave Toronto still in possession of a playoff spot, since they led Toronto by a game and a half going into Thursday night for one of the wild card spots. But we'll get to some scheduling stuff over the last 2 weeks of the season in a second. Also want to talk, obviously, Evan Carter, because while I think everybody has walked off the ledge a little bit following the Rangers skid, I think there's plenty of frenzy over Evan Carter. And I want to talk about what I think one of the unsung heroes of the Rangers' recent resurgence, and that is Robbie Grossman, who's really filled a vital role here at a late point in the season. This is why, we'll get to it, but this is why the Rangers hired some veterans to fill out their bench. Anyway, here we go. So, Max Scherzer, you all know the bad news, I assume, by this point in time. He has strained the teres major muscle behind his right shoulder. So that is kind of back here near the scapula and everything. This way you get a nice look at my flabby arm too. But he has strained that muscle. The Rangers defined it as a low-grade strain. The bottom line is he's still not going to pitch the remainder of this year, and probably not during the postseason should the Rangers advance. The bottom line on this injury is that it requires rest. It's not a surgical repair, but it requires rest. Talked to Jose Leclerc, who suffered this injury in 2020, within a week of Corey Kluber suffering the same injury in 2020. And Leclerc didn't require surgery, but it was basically 8 weeks of rest on that, from the throwing motion. There are at best 6 weeks left in this season, 7 weeks if you go to Game 7 of the World Series, and so it just doesn't seem like it would add up for Scherzer to get back and pitch this year. It's a tough blow for the Rangers, really is. It's hard to replace a 3-time Cy Young. Well, it's hard to replace a starter. It's really difficult to replace a Cy Young Award winner. I don't know how you replace a guy who's won 3. And when you look at the Rangers shelf right now, they've got 5 Cy Young trophies on the shelf. It makes for a nice looking shelf, but kind of hurts the rotation. Anyway, with Scherzer out, it's not an ideal situation. The Rangers acquired him at the trade deadline basically because he was the guy that could start Game 1 in a playoff series, that could potentially bounce back and pitch Game 7 in a series. It's another body blow for this team. I mean, there's no other way around it. The numbers on injuries are staggering. Between DeGrom and Scherzer, that's 5 Cy Young awards. You look at the 6 All-Stars the Rangers had this year, 5 of them have now spent time on the IL in the second half alone. Seager, Garcia, Josh Young, Eovaldi, and Jonah Hahn. It's a remarkable number, and it would be easy to sit and moan about the injuries, but I don't think that's who Bruce Bochy is. I don't think that's who Chris Young is, and I think that's the message they passed on to this team, and they by and large, I think, have understood that. There are times when I think the injuries did add up and really did impact this team, particularly on the offensive side. You know, Garcia was certainly not the same player in the second half leading up to his knee injury. But you couple that with Heim and Young being out of the lineup, and you were basically missing your number 4, 5, and 6 hitters for a good portion of time. As we speak, or as I'm speaking, because we're not really speaking. If you're watching this, maybe you're listening to me. But as I speak on Thursday morning, Josh Young is, I think, about to enter a doctor's office in Seattle, in Phoenix. Yes, he is. For what should be final clearance, the Rangers hope, Josh Young hopes, to allow him to get back on the field in terms of facing live pitching. And if all that goes well, he would go to the Rangers minor league facility or spring training facility in Surprise, Arizona on Thursday afternoon, start taking some live batting practice, and maybe take it all the way through the weekend and then be activated for the homestand that begins with Boston on Monday. No, it doesn't sound like the Rangers are going to send him out on a rehab, but they will give him something of a rehab assignment by having him face live pitching in Phoenix for a couple days. The difference here between the Heim and Seager injuries, in which those guys basically took batting practice one day and were on the field either the next or that afternoon, is this: Josh has missed 4 weeks now, and there is still this matter with his thumb. It's hard for him to tell how hard he's gripping the bat in some regards, where the thumb is concerned. That thumb that he fractured and that was surgically repaired, doctors had to cut through nerves. It takes a while for nerves to kind of refire, regenerate, and so there is some. He's able to move the finger and the thumb, and he's able to. First thing he was doing that he was showing us was that was his exercise for the first couple of days. But it is a matter of there still is a matter of feel and grip strength, and it's going to take him some time to navigate that. As he said to me the other day, the first day that he had taken batting practice off a machine, you know, he spent the whole time kind of focusing on his hand because he didn't have faint feeling right here and didn't focus on his swing. So he missed 4 weeks of playing time, which is more than Seager and Simeon and Heim missed, and he's got an ongoing issue with that thumb. So it's going to take a couple more days before he is ready, but he should be ready. He should be available for the final 2 weeks of the season. And look, the Rangers play 7 games against Seattle in that 2-week stretch. Those are huge games, and if you get Young 3 days of swinging over the weekend in Arizona, comes back, gets 3 games against Boston, you would hope that after a week of that he'd be in a position to really start contributing again. And the Rangers aren't ruling out Adolis Garcia being back for that Seattle series either. He's started to do some baseball activity on his knee, which kind of hyperextended, and he suffered a strain of the patellar tendon last week. There was real thought that tendon had been ruptured and that he was going to require surgery, and being ready for the start of the 2024 season would have been in question. So it's been a best case scenario, but he's still not back, and I don't think that he's a real option before Seattle comes to town a week from Friday. All of that said, the Rangers are starting to get their lineup back together. They seem to have recovered some from this long stretch in which the offense really struggled, and they are putting some runs on the board again. They've scored double figures in 2 of the games against Toronto in the first 3 days. Gave them 25 games of double figures this season, ties a franchise record. They have hit home runs, which is what they've done all season, but they have also tacked on runs in run scoring opportunities, and they've been kind of opportunistic too. They've scored on They forced a balk. Mitch Garver and Tony Beasley, the third base coach, forced a balk in the series opener. They've scored on some wild pitches. They've used some sacrifice flies. They've used all the means at their disposal to score runs, which is what a team missing hitters really needs to do. I'm sorry I'm so fidgety. The chair is a rolling chair, and it's a hardwood floor, and I have a low center of gravity, so it's hard for me to stay still. But that brings me to my next point, which is Robbie Grossman. He's been a godsend to the Rangers in September. And really, it goes back farther than that, particularly against left-handed pitching, where he's very, very effective. But overall, Robbie has a .400 on-base percentage since July 1. Talking 140 plate appearances, most of them against left-handers. In September, he's slashing, well, these stats will be old, but for the first 2 weeks of September, he slashed 323, 452, 613, 1015. And in a lot of those games, he was backing up Corey Seager. And so teams that chose to pitch around Corey Seager were having to face the fact that Robbie's got really good strike zone judgment. He was willing to take a walk. All of a sudden, you're pushing Corey Seager if you walk him into run scoring position. Grossman has in 7 games since moving into the middle of the order to kind of fill that void while Adolis Garcia's out. He had reached 13 times in his first 27 plate appearances. He had 7 RBIs and 7 runs scored in 7 games. It's the kind of production you need somebody to have when you've got guys out. Likewise, Evan Carter has been everything that the Rangers hoped he would be when he got to the big leagues at the bottom of the order. The Rangers had gone through some real stretches at the bottom of the order when they had some injuries. And Leody Taveras struggled, Ezekiel Duran struggled. What Carter has done is take really professional at-bats at the bottom of the lineup. I've calculated this a couple different times in his first week or so in the big leagues. But as I tape this, he's now faced 85 total pitches over a week, 40 of those outside the zone. He's swung at 3 pitches outside the zone. It's a less than 10% chase rate. He swung and missed at 1 of those pitches. Had a 1 swing and miss, had a single on 1 of those pitches, which was a pitch inside that he ripped for his first big league hit. And the third was a 2-strike pitch that he was trying to fight off down and away and popped out. The point here is he's not afraid to go to 2 strikes. The point is he's not going to swing he's not going to chase pitchers' pitches. He's going to force pitchers to get him out. And it's a really advanced approach for anybody. But to do that 2 weeks past your 21st birthday really says a lot about Evan Carter. And I think it just goes to the point that this is not a guy who's up here and just had a good week. I think this is a guy with a good basis, a good base for his strike zone, a good approach to the plate, and a guy who is certainly going to figure in the 2024 roster. Fortunately, the Rangers don't really have to think about that at the moment. This September is more about winning baseball games and maybe making the postseason. It's not about an extended spring training look. But I think in Carter, the Rangers feel like they've got the same kind of advanced approach that they had with Josh Young. They brought him up feeling like even if he didn't succeed up here, the Rangers felt that Carter gave them the best chance for success of their left-handed hitting left field options. But I think they also felt the same way that they felt about Josh Young last year. That this is a guy who understands hitting theory well enough that regardless of what the outcomes here were, he would use that as a propellant in the next year, and that's what Josh Young did last year. He really got taken advantage of by some pitchers, but he has a good idea about hitting, had a good idea about what he needed to do at the plate, and was able to take a 3-week snip at a time in which he was exposed to big league pitching and make adjustments over the offseason to his approach and his swing. And it's why Josh Young was in some ways Josh was maybe leading the American League Rookie of the Year race when he got hurt. I don't think he can win AL Rookie of the Year now. I think that's probably in the hands of Gunnar Henderson. But he's given the Rangers a tremendous rookie season. All right, so we've got Scherzer. One other thing I wanted to mention about Max Scherzer here. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know why I did that. But one other thing I wanted to mention about Max Scherzer is this is a hard enough situation to go through. It's impossible to replace that guy. But for a team that's in the playoff race, to have two guys like Martin Perez or Andrew Heaney that it could fall back on to try and fill the gap for 3 regular season starts is a testament to the work that Chris Young did trying to put together as many starting pitching options as possible. From my perspective, I think Heaney's the most likely guy to go back in the rotation just because he'd been there the longest. He's really been hit and miss in the rotation, but I also think maybe the Rangers take an approach with him of limiting his pitch count and maybe even limiting his pitch repertoire. When he can throw fastball slider, he's a great 3-4 inning pitcher, and maybe over the stretch run, the Rangers look to piggyback him with somebody. Get 3 innings or 4 innings out of him, get 3 or 4 innings out of somebody behind him, and then go to the pieces you feel like can win in the back of the bullpen for you. Likewise, Perez, he's a year removed from being an all-star. I think on a lot of other teams, Martin probably would have gotten chances to continue to start in August. The Rangers' expectations and the bar this team set changed over the course of the year, and because of that, the Rangers went out and got Max Scherzer and got Jordan Montgomery, and that is why Martin moved to the bullpen. Cody Bradford also figures in the mix, and maybe the Rangers look at it from this perspective that Perez has pitched well in the bullpen. Heaney really profiles well as a postseason bullpen pitcher. Maybe the Rangers say Bradford throws strikes. He's not going to beat himself early in games. We'll use him to start games and see where we go from there over the final 3 turns. Don't really have answers on that yet, but the Rangers do have options. They are not simply grasping at straws. They don't have a Cy Young Award winner to go to, but they've got legitimate pitching options. All right, a couple things about the schedule before we go. The Rangers, as you know, have 7 games against Seattle remaining. Seattle, however, has 10 games against the Rangers in Houston. Houston will go to Seattle next week to start the week. And then Seattle comes to the Rangers at the end of next week. So it's a big week for the Mariners, who seem to have fallen off their hot streak a little bit. Big week for the Rangers as well. If they can play well against Boston when the Red Sox come to town, they've got a chance to be gaining on at least one team, either right ahead of them or right behind them in a very tight AL West and wild card race. So, listen, I think over the final 2 weeks, the schedule most favors Houston, which still has a bunch of games left with Kansas City. But the Rangers get through this final game in Toronto, get through Cleveland, they come home for their final homestand, and then they go to Anaheim and Seattle. And listen, I think this season will be decided by how the Rangers play those final 7 games against the Mariners, 3 in Arlington, 4 in Seattle over the final 10 days. That's it from here. I don't know that I've got a whole lot else. I've got my cards that are very organized. I wish I had some funny stuff for you today, but I don't. Nevertheless, we'll be here. We'll be here for you next week. Be here for you whenever and however long the Rangers may run in the postseason. But until then, so long, everybody. This is good video.